Joining us tonight for our Facebook Live event. Tonight we have 4 panelists with us to talk about coping during COVID, building resiliency, and strengthening community. So tonight we have Romana Simpson, Executive Director with Ketchikan Wellness Coalition. We have Derek Meister, School Psychologist, Cynthia Eckholm, Licensed Clinical Social Worker with Ketchikan Indian Community, and Abby Stevenson, who is a Certified Meditation Instructor. And Abby is also part of our EOC PIO team. Behind the scenes, we have some more of our PIO team helping to moderate. We have Casey Paxton and Kim Simpson. So thank you to all for joining us. We've done a couple of these now, and we're going to stick with the same format. It's a Q&A type of format. We have people watching us, hopefully watching us on Facebook Live. And if you are watching us there, you can feel free to put your questions in the comments. And our team behind the scenes will pick those up and feed them over to us so that we can try to help answer those. In the case that nobody wants to ask us questions, we do have some prepared questions in advance that we've worked on to make sure we can get information out to the community. In just a minute here, I'll ask our panelists to make brief opening comments. Hopefully they'll introduce themselves and maybe consider sharing with you a summary of their experiences during COVID and potentially some resources that might be available for the community. And I think with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So why don't we start off with Carolyn tonight?
Great. Hi, guys. Yeah, I'm Cynthia Eckholm. I'm a children's clinician at KIC Behavioral Health. So I work with kiddos, and the COVID coronavirus has definitely, it's been a big past year, both personally and professionally. And I think out of all the negative things, all the stuff that we all know that's going on that has been a result of the COVID pandemic, that I'm super impressed and amazed by Ketchikan and the opportunity that we have in our small community to really create wellness amongst our youth and families. Because, working at KAC and behavioral health, there's also substance abuse programs, and those numbers are going up. People are using things, those coping skills that they know work. They're not healthy, but they work for them. And, and I see kids every day, and I'm amazed at the level of stress that they experience, but also really proud and really honored to see those glimpses of resilience, those strengths that sometimes you got to find them and pull them out, but they're there. So I think this has given our little community a good opportunity to figure out how to serve people and make sure everyone is well.
Yeah, so thanks, Carolyn. Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that. I think that the holidays could be a really tough time for people on top of COVID. So it's pretty neat to see the amount of resources and the engaged folks that we have in our community. All of you being willing to take time out of your evening to join me on here and talk about a really important topic. Let's move on to Romanda.
Hi, good evening, everybody. I'm Romana Simpson, Executive Director of Ketchikan Wellness Coalition. I'm a huge mental health advocate, and as such, I'm a mental health first aid trainer, and I teach different curriculums for different groups of the population. And kind of echoing Carolyn, our community is amazing, and what I've been seeing as the Wellness Coalition, one of the things that we did at the beginning of COVID was putting out resources. Just there's so much information constantly changing, and I actually look at my own experience as stages of COVID, because the initial stage was like, oh my gosh, I would work 16-hour days. I couldn't, turn it off because I was working from home, and my daughter would bring me food because I would forget to eat. But it was because I had this passion to make sure I was supporting my community. And actually being able to facilitate. So many community members stepped up, especially at that beginning when it was so stressful and so uncertain. People, watching the sheer number of people that sewed masks was incredible. And we were so blessed to be part of that kind of initiative in different ways. And That was sort of the first couple months. And then there was the, okay, we're here. How do we navigate this? And kind of keep trucking on. And one of the things I laugh about myself is I'm a doer. And eventually I found I had to ask to be taken care of instead of taking care of everybody else. I hit this stage, and that was probably October, when I had to sit down and have a conversation with my family at the dinner table and being like, I am so tired. I was also having lots of personal things going on in my life. And I just needed that support. And I look at my experience with that. And then after I had that support, my family, my stepdaughter Meta and my husband Andrew, amazing, stepped up, did a lot of taking care of me. And being okay with that, I think was really important. And as soon as I was okay with accepting the help, my experience of COVID has actually shifted. And so now I'm in this a little bit more, I don't want to say resigned because that has like a negative connotation, but just accepting and being like, okay. And then through my work, I've been blessed to work with youth just like Carolyn that are like dealing with it and like, let's move on. And they want to talk about bigger issues and like, we still need to do this and still need to do that. And recognizing that our community really is resilient already, and watching connections being built has been amazing. So that's kind of been my experience, and I look forward to continuing to talk about how we can make sure we're making connection and building a community of support.
Perfect. Thanks. And thanks for being on here again tonight. I really appreciate it. Let's go over to Derek.
Hey, everybody. My name's Derek Meister. I'm a school psychologist with our school district here in Ketchikan. Thank you for going first, you two, because you actually got the gears turning in my head. I wasn't quite sure what I was going to say, but I guess I do want to say first that I'm not from Ketchikan originally. From Minnesota. Been a guest here, these beautiful and sacred lands, since 2012, and I find this community to be beyond impressive and, like you said, resilient and just so supportive. This community really kind of comes out to support and get each other's back. But yeah, my experience of COVID has been a roller coaster as well. And listening to both of you speak about your own experiences, I remember back in near the end of the spring break when I got the phone call to join a committee to try to map out how we were going to do education for the remainder of the school year. And that was that was a roller coaster, I guess is the best way to describe it. It was cool to be part of that, but it was probably the most stressful time in my career. And I feel like I have a lot of support. Like, I'm in a privileged position. I've got a loving wife, and we just had a baby, which is a stressor, but also this wonderful thing. So I got to be at home with my baby, but having to try to figure out something that we didn't have a playbook for at home with home things happening and working, and the extra time was just, it really tested me. But I also feel like there's these wonderful gifts that come out of stressful moments like this in our lives. And I couldn't even begin to tell you how many things that I have to be grateful for in my world, people I work with professionally, and the people in my life personally. And yeah, it has been an incredible year, and it's also very exciting to be in 2020 and to be out in front of that year that we don't name any longer. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thanks for being here, Derek, and thanks for sharing that. Abby.
Hi, everyone. I'm Abby. You may know me as the gal who works for KPU TV, but what you may not know is that I'm a certified meditation instructor. I discovered it in 2013 when I went through a career change. I was living in New York City, and I was vice president of a big global bank, and I was miserable. And I finally made the decision to change my career and pursue my lifelong dream of working in media. And I was freaked out. Like, I was like, people were telling me I was going to fail. I was homeless when I was younger, and I was really afraid I would become homeless again. It was very scary. And I discovered meditation as a tool to be able to build that resiliency in the face of when there is chaos happening around you, being able to have a strong foundation internally to make decisions. And so I am here in that capacity to talk to you about meditation and breathing in general and how that can be used as a tool. I have lived in Ketchikan for 5 months now. I was serving in the Peace Corps in Africa before I moved here, and I was evacuated because of COVID. So not only did I have to come back and reacclimate into the developed world, but I also had to acclimate into a world that nobody had ever seen before. And that required a lot of resiliency. And again, meditation came in as a tool that I was able to use to become centered and to just be calm and to connect with other people and make the decisions I need to make. So far in my experience in Ketchikan, I have been really impressed with the adaptability. You know, I'm out there, I'm talking to the business community, I'm talking to members of our community every day, and I can hear how they have been able to adapt to be able to function in this what can be a stressful environment. And I'm super impressed. Like the fact that we're even having this meeting right now via WebEx for the community is mind blowing. Right? That wasn't something that was happening a year ago. So I just want to say thank you to Ketchikan and the response for COVID-19. And I can't wait to share with you the tools that I have tonight.
That's awesome. Thanks, Abby. So I want to go back to a term that Romanda brought up. She talked about mental health. You used the term mental health. And mental health isn't always something that people are almost afraid of that word. Oh, my mental health, right? And there's maybe even been a stigma attached to it. But I think, you know, it's important that you make mental health and your own mental health a priority. And I know, Romanda, you like to talk a little bit about self-care, and maybe you can talk a little bit about the importance of mental health and why it's important to recognize that, and some self-care techniques that people can use.
Yeah, definitely. It's interesting because, you know, we not too many generations ago, it was always, shh, we don't talk about this or don't talk about that. And I really see a huge shift now. I actually, in our youth in particular, they are asking to talk about mental health and what can we do to support our friends' mental health. And it's so beautiful because for so long, physical health was the be all end all. But really, if we don't have mental health, our physical, they're connected. They're not separate things. And so taking care of our mental health actually impacts our physical health as well. There's tons and tons of research about, you know, some of the chronic diseases and how it actually relates back to your mental health. So for, you know, resources, we're so lucky because there's tons of self-help and self-care ideas out there. One of the things I find is this positive self-help in that, like, it's a bubble bath, and for some people it is a bubble bath, or it's chocolate or whatever. But self-care really looks different for everybody, and we just have to make sure it's about finding what's working for you. And, you know, we sent in some resources with ideas, and they'll be listed on the city's website with resources. But as an example, I'm thinking about a friend who, for her self-care, she goes and jumps in the ocean. And I'm looking at her like, I would love to maybe do that, but that's a little daunting for me. And it's not something that's going to feed my soul right now. I actually probably am much more the chocolate and bath right now. And we might change what works for us for self-care depending on where we're at in life, depending on what's working. But honestly, self-care can be like taking 10 minutes in a quiet room and just breathing. Or like for me, this is my own self-care journey. I like a clean house and I like my kitchen clean and all that. But at the height of COVID, when I was really stressed out, I realized that actually was adding to my stress. And I realized that self-care at that moment meant being okay with having dishes on the counter at the end of the night. And so we don't think of self-care in those ways oftentimes, but it's about finding something that makes you feel good about yourself or some way to take care of yourself. I mean, I'm looking at these lists, and I mean, honestly, drinking cold water is on this list, you know, writing a poem, like there's random things, but I really, really encourage people listening tonight to pause and think, what either brings me joy or gives me peace or calms me down? And give yourself even 5 minutes. Actually, my therapist said to me the other day, I was like, I really need to exercise, but I just can't prioritize it. And she's like, well, what about 15 minutes? I said, oh, I don't have 15 minutes. And she says, what amount, like what time would work for you? I said, 5. I can handle 5 minutes. So she said, walk for 5 minutes. Of course, I went out and I started walking and I walked for 25 minutes. But, the idea of 15 minutes was so daunting. But committing to 5 minutes for myself, that actually felt huge. But once I did it, I was like, okay, I can do this 5 minutes. And so it doesn't have to be big. And that's the biggest thing. People think, oh, well, I don't have time for self-care. If you don't take time for self-care now, you will burn out and you will actually probably get sick. And which then at what point, then what? So the 5 minutes a day, honestly, will make a huge difference. Do a grateful, I love the idea of a grateful journal where you write one thing, or even honestly just verbalize the one thing. My husband and I, when we first met, that's what we did. Every night before we go to bed, we would say one thing we were grateful for. Self-care can also look like eating dinner with your family. In times like this, when everything is crazy, you're like, I just need to get this, or I need to finish this, or I need to do that. Sitting down at the dinner table as a family is pretty powerful. We do a thing at home where we actually do our highs and lows. So we share the high of the day and the low of the day. And it's so impactful. And our 18-year-old daughter, we've done it now for 4 years. So since I moved here and joined this family, 4 years. And if I forget, she's now the one saying, what's your high and low? So things like that. Self-care is, I'm sure everybody's got some ideas. We've got resources that we're going to put up, but do take the time and priority for it.
Yeah, thanks. So you mentioned the resources a couple times, and I want to tell people where they can find some of those. They are available on the Borough website on our COVID-19 dashboard. And so you can visit kgbak.us/COVID-19 and click on the resources in the left-hand column, or you can go to kgbak.us/COVID resources, no space, no dash or anything like that in there, and that will jump you straight to that page. And so as we did the Facebook Live a couple weeks ago, our panelists then had some resources for us, and then this group also has provided some more. We'll have links to those things on that page that you can access there. So Carolyn, for you, I think, it's important to recognize that COVID has added a lot of stress to people's lives, and some people are anxious over it. Maybe you can talk a little bit about how COVID has added anxiety and stress to people's lives, and maybe ways that they can try to address those feelings. I think you're muted, Carolyn.
Mute me. Okay. Can you hear me now?
Gotcha.
I think one of the big pieces that the pandemic has kind of brought to us, and like hands down across all types of people and ages, is that the need for predictability, for structure, for grounding, and what do we know, what to be expected throughout the day. So normal feelings of anxiety have been exasperated by this, because we don't get to engage often maybe in the things like Romanda was talking about, our self-care, like going to the gym or dance classes or whatever those activities were. So it's kind of just heightened that experience of like we have this shaky ground. We don't know, what tomorrow is going to bring. And with that, I lost my train of thought because I got unmuted. But with that, the importance of, even though we don't know what tomorrow is, or if, I remember like checking emails. Oh, am I going to get an email from the school that the kids like have to be home or whatnot? But even with that uncertainty, there's things you can do each morning to create rituals, breakfast, each night, like Romanda was saying, sitting down for dinner, the high and the lows. Like those are so important to continue on, even though there's lots of uncertainty out there. but to reduce those anxieties through predictability, through routine, through structure. Because within all that, we know from kids, it's really important for their sense of safety. But also as adults, I know myself has realized, like, I'm not good with the change, like working from home one day, working in the office one day. Those transitions are really challenging. So what can I do daily to ensure that I have some sort of I know I'm going to do this in the morning. I'm going to wake up, I'm going to shower, I'm going to get my kids ready, I'm going to give some thanks. I'm going to gratitude. I've definitely incorporated into my daily sort of, routine and with my kids. And did I answer that?
Yeah, no, that was good. I think that you talked about routine, and I think sometimes it just becomes normal that we have our daily routine. Like, I get up, I go to the office, I go home for lunch. After lunch, I go back to work. Like, we get used to that. And then when something like COVID comes along and disturbs that, you don't even realize how much extra stress that puts on you. You might not even realize it at the time, but it's important for us as humans, I think, to have routines. So that was good thoughts.
And could I add on just as far as, with the self-care piece, it's not, self-care isn't just about like, oh, I had a rough day, I need to take a bath or do something. Self-care is like ongoing, every day, a good day, a bad day, throughout the day. Because what I've realized is, like, I let down my guard, like with meditation. That's something that I've really incorporated into my life in the past 6 months. And I was like, oh, I'm feeling pretty good, I'm going to just take a break, or no, it's an okay day. But then we build, right? We build and we don't even know that we're building. And then we're just like, oh, that extra drive to my kids' other campus, that threw me over the edge. So we're not aware. So we always, with the self-care, keeping a reserve of stuff to draw on when those unpredictable things happen.
That's a good point. And self-care, I think what I'm hearing you guys saying, self-care is going to look different maybe for everybody. What works for me isn't going to work for you, or might not work for Derek, right?
Yeah.
So having a large toolbox, if you will, to draw from can be useful.
Yeah. And using those in times when you're not stressed, just as a form of practice,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Derek's a jump in the ocean kind of guy. So
yeah, I was thinking that.
So with talking about different self-care tools, I know, Abby, you're is it a licensed meditation coach? Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Sure.
Yeah.
So when I was leaving for the Peace Corps, I knew that I wanted to share with people the gift of meditation in Africa, and I didn't know how to share it with people. So I had always been a very internal private practice that I had for years, and I said, you know what, I'm going to get certified. So I am certified through the Chopra Center for Meditation with Deepak Chopra, and the method that we use is primordial sound meditation. But tonight I'm going to start simple and just talk about some breathing exercises and why meditation is important.
Okay. So you probably want to talk a little bit more about that later on as we have a more in-depth discussion on tools.
I just hear everyone talking about stress, and it's like, I feel like what's happening in a world of COVID is that our body is experiencing this stress that we're feeling with the pandemic, and it's putting our body into fight or flight mode, right? That's your natural response to stress. And so it releases the hormone called cortisol. And so, yeah, of course, fight or flight is really helpful when you're being attacked by a tiger, right? But it's not always necessary. It can have damaging effects physically on you if you are in this fight or flight mode all the time and there is no tiger. And I feel like with the influx of the news streams that we're getting every day, we're on our phones constantly, the television's on, not to mention the stress of a worldwide pandemic. Money, family, all of these things are really building up, and we need to be able to have what everyone is talking about, these ways of self-care that we introduce into our lives to create those reserves that we need to be able to function.
Right. Our bodies are really designed for a short burst of fight or flight, right? You get the fight done and over, or you get away, and then your body can reset itself.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we might not even realize it, but stress could be impacting our health right now. Things like headaches, or over and under eating, lack of motivation, weight loss, sleep problems, upset stomachs. Those are all ways that stress can impact your body. Like you mentioned, short-temperedness or inability to focus. That can affect your mind and your mood as well.
Yeah. So, Derek, I want to pull you into the conversation a little bit here. Working with students at the school age kids, are these things the same for students and kids? Is it different? What are some of their stressors during COVID, and how can we recognize those?
It's interesting. I think stress and, much of what we're talking about is related and has to do with this trauma-informed, trauma-engaged approach to helping people. And I think to a degree, you could say, neurologically, from just looking at brains across human beings, kids to adults, there's a lot more that's in common than different. But of course, things that might be stressing kids out might not be the same things that are stressing out their parents or the adults. And it's hard to kind of know with kids what to talk about, what to share, how much they might need to know, how much you feel like they should be expected to shoulder in terms of the responsibilities in the home and juggling the responsibilities at school. So I think there's a lot more in common than different, but the way that these things manifest in people is really, really diverse. I mean, it can manifest in any number of ways, like we've mentioned, like anxiety or like withdrawal, like symptoms of depression, like shutting down, or just, I would say the thing to look for is a notable change in like the baseline behavior that you knew before. And that can be hard because these things don't always happen like a light switch. Like the pandemic happened and not everyone just sort of flipped, right? Like this has been a process and a progression over time. So really drawing on our experiences of what we know of kids, what we know of our friends and family, what we know of our colleagues, and just noticing changes in behavior, I think is a really great place to start. And then I think, like Abby mentioned, we're going to be talking a little bit more probably about strategies and, tying the mental health and the self-care piece all together a little bit later. But yeah, those are some really good places to start. I also think like not being afraid to ask the question, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And like really wanting to know, like the genuine ask, right? Like not just, I've got a strategy about how I'm going to try to help this person because I've already made up my mind about what they need and what's going on with them. We all do this, right? Like we kind of go through the script in our mind and we have our monologue all set up. And then when you're Facebook Live, it just goes poof and disappears. But I think like really being present with each other is one of the most important things we can do to support each other right now. And oftentimes we find this in the world of counseling and therapy often is that there really isn't words. There aren't words sometimes that are going to help or change anything, but you being there and showing compassion and being empathic, really trying to understand someone else's experience and just being there is sometimes all you can do, and it is enough sometimes, and sometimes it's even more than what you might be able to come up with in terms of the perfect one-liner that might help someone.
Can I follow up on that? Because it kind of brings me into a theme that I've heard a lot throughout COVID, connection and our relationships and how important they are. I think COVID really brought to light just how foundational our personal relationships are to our well-being. And, we're hearing a lot of, well, now we can't see people in person. And yeah, okay, so there's some limitations to how that looks. But I keep thinking about all of the amazing ways in which we are able to still connect and or rediscover. So, I mean, here we are in this new amazing like virtual world, which, you know, gets a little bit tiring. We get kind of tired of it, you know, if we prefer to be in person, but amazing. Like I can now chat to my mom on Zoom. We tend to do Facebook chat, but you know, video call, like she's more used to it now because that's just when you suddenly can't, and she doesn't even live here. So it's not like I saw her in person before, but now COVID's kind of like, oh, well, now I got to see my family. And then I think about how, like writing letters. You know, I had a friend write to me and she sent me a letter and it was just describing what her and her kids were up to and how they were managing with COVID and like the things that they've changed. And I mean, it was like the mundane life stuff. But it was so amazing to get a letter and then to hear about her story and her experience of COVID. And it felt like, okay, well, it's not mine. I don't have young children, but like I could relate and appreciate and empathize with what her challenges were. And, you know, the letters, and I mean, honestly, at Christmas time, for the first time in my life, I actually wish I had sent out Christmas cards and with photos and like COVID survivor, you know, like, like those, because when I started to receive them, I still felt so connected to my friends and my family in a way that I really appreciated at this point. And so honestly, like Derek's saying, like, call somebody. If you're thinking about them, don't wait till tomorrow. Call them and just say, I just want you to know I'm thinking about you. And if it's 2 minutes, okay, it's 2 minutes. But that call could be the huge thing in their day that honestly impacts them in a way you might not even ever know. And so, you know, we only have today to guarantee right now at this moment. So take those moments and build that connection whatever way we can, you know, whether it's a text and I'm just thinking of you, or, hey, how are you doing? Check in with your colleagues. You know, if you've got a young person in your life, have that conversation. I just love it, but because relationships are the powerhouse, really. They're just everything to us. And I think it's when I think about all of the positive things I see about COVID, it's about the relationships that I see being built and connections being made and the care that people are expressing for individuals who they don't even know. And I think that that's what, you know, keeps us going.
Yeah, it is pretty neat to see these different tools. Like you said, we're here virtually on 5 different computers talking to each other like we're in the same room sort of thing. But I tell you what, in 6 months to a year, I hope that I can see all of you in person instead of having to do this virtually because, you know, there's just something to be said for in person.
Better. When we don't have to be in the same room, we are doing great.
Yeah, for sure. So I think that even someone who doesn't think they're a social person, I think we're all pretty social. I don't have to be surrounded by people all the time, but I definitely find the longer this goes on, the more I miss seeing people. And so, like, and this is, I guess, for anybody, how do you make those connections? Like, how do you work through that? What works for you guys?
I'm going to do a really quick one here, and then I think I saw Carolyn's mouth about to move too.
Yeah.
I think about the grocery store. So I'm from Vancouver, Canada, and I've lived in like London and Toronto, so really big cities. And I laughed when I moved here because my husband would spend forever in the grocery stores. And I was like, he knows everybody. Well, guess what? I've been here 4 years and I know more than him, like more people than he does. So now he left. He doesn't come to the grocery store with me anymore. But like, that was my thing. I loved going to the grocery store because I'd see somebody and I'd spend half an hour talking to them. And I have 3 people, so I'd spend an hour and a half just talking to people. When COVID hit, I'm like in and out, or there was a few times when we got really high with cases there. I was like, I'm not going to, and I ordered my groceries for the first time in my life. And how that hit me was way more, you know, and that was huge. And I didn't actually expect it to be. So now I'm going back to the grocery store. I can, you know, I've got a mask and I can hardly see them. It's the eyes for me. You know, we might not stop and talk, but we like do like, you can see the little crinkle in the eyes, and then you kind of do like the head nod, and you might do a wave, you know, because they're across the way or whatever, or you'll say, hey, and then keep going. And it's small, but it's like, you know, it's way better than at first where everyone was head down and just go, 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 get out. And so those little, it's such a small component of it, but even that makes me feel connected again, and almost like it's hilarious, like we're in on an inside joke, you know, peeking up over our masks and stuff. So
Thanks. Yeah, Carolyn, did you have something you wanted to add, I think?
I didn't know, but
Okay.
I was going to say, just as far as like the connecting with people via mask, I've had a lot of, oops, I really don't know you, but hi, you know. So connecting with people, and then I've struck up conversations with like, oh, you know, it's hard to see, but now we have this connection that, oh, so that's been kind of funny. That's all I had to add as you were talking about the grocery store and, you know, me saying random hellos to people I don't know that are now friends.
Yeah.
I don't know who you are, Carolyn.
Yeah.
Derek, was there something? It looked like you leaned in towards your camera at one point. Did you have something to add on that topic, or?
Oh,
No?
probably. No, there's just so much. There's so many different dimensions to this conversation, you know, like how do you go about connecting with people? And what we're talking about, these, like the power of being connected to others, the power of being social, the power of relationships, like that is much more highly correlated in psychology research with longevity, health, wellness, happiness than like any other factor. It's more important than diet. It's more important than exercise. Those things are important, but relationships tend to have this protective factor, which is, you know, when we talk about resilience, if you want to be more resilient, it's all about connecting with your circle of people, your circle of care. And that doesn't have to always be like your number one most trusted best friend, confidant, like acquaintances, or, you know, even strangers in the grocery store, but also friends, family, colleagues. When we connect with other people and we engage our circle of social connections, that does something that helps us to survive. And I think it's something that's really, really old in the human brain that's gotten us through a lot of hard times. And I think it's precisely what's helping us get through COVID. And yeah.
Yeah. No, that's good. So I want to go back to Carolyn for just a minute. In the notes from our preparation discussions and everything, we talked about the feeling of being overwhelmed, and how people often don't know what to do with that, how to recognize it, how to put words to it. You want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah. I think it kind of goes back to a little bit, you know, with the self-care piece on not really like constantly engaging. But I think sometimes we don't know that we're overwhelmed or that it comes to head. Like Romanda had said, you know, like, gosh, I didn't realize that until October, like I needed help too. You know, and I think especially coming from a place professionally where I'm working with kids and teens and youth and ideally often their families together, is that, you know, sometimes our kids, our youth, they have so many emotions all at one time that they don't know how to name them, express them. They don't know why the heck they're feeling them, which adds a whole other level of like frustration. Like my 7-year-old daughter, she has all these big feelings and she's been really impacted by COVID. My son's okay, but she doesn't have her activities. And she's like, I just don't know what I feel. And it's like, they're feeling all these big stuff and these overwhelming feelings and not being able to name them. So I think at first it just being able to acknowledge, like, what the heck? Like, yeah, you're feeling sad, you're feeling frustrated, you're feeling angry all at the same time. You know, let's laugh about it. Let's be able to like, blame it on Corona. You know, I mean, humor is big in my house, so I mean that's how we've been coping with it a lot. Music. But especially families that I work with, that this overwhelming sense of stressors in their life, like finding the one thing that creates joy with them, and sometimes it's just really simple or little, but really just working through that place, to first acknowledge that being overwhelmed, like that's a normal human condition, right? I mean, we all experience it, and it's not a bad thing. It's certainly not, it doesn't feel good, but it's part of our mental health, that kind of that continuum, and to acknowledge it and to be okay. Like right now, I'm overwhelmed by a lot of things. I might not be able to pinpoint exactly what it is, but that it will be okay. And I go basically, I think as basic human beings, we think things, we feel things, and we do things. And when we're in our brain a lot and we're thinking a lot, like move through that. Like don't get stuck in that thinking like, oh my gosh, what's tomorrow going to bring? I'm so worried about this or that. Like get up, wash your face with cold water, or go for a walk or do a jumping jack. So, I mean, when we're feeling overwhelmed, take inventory. We think, feel, and do. Where are we at? Are we feeling a lot? Are we feeling really sad and anxious? Where are our thoughts going? Okay, let's do something differently, if that makes sense. To break it down just simply, as simple human beings, those are 3 basic things we all do.
Right. Oh, that's good.
Can I follow up on that? It makes me
You
think
can.
about when I was feeling really overwhelmed. So I had mentioned earlier that I'm a doer. Like I am always just go, go, go. And I really thrive off of it normally. And I got to a point, so I'm pregnant, and so life changed a little bit physically, but also emotionally. I mean, being pregnant in the time of COVID, and it's a high-risk pregnancy, so there's all of these considerations. So there's all of this, plus there's still all the other things, and I was trying to, go, go, go. And my therapist said to me, rest is productive, Romanda. And I was like, right, okay, that's really hard for me to get my head around because I feel like sitting on the couch is being lazy because that's how I was raised and that's just my personality. And so to me, I'm like, well, no, there's too much to do. I got to clean it. Like, and I'd see the house and I'm like, I have to clean because it's still there to do. And she's like, but your rest is just as important as all of those other things, if not more important at times, especially when life is the way it is right now. And so don't underestimate the power of rest, and don't look at rest as being, I'm being lazy, because you're not. You're being productive for yourself and your physical and mental well-being. And that is just as important as all the other lists of things that you have to get done. So I think the message there is just remember, like, rest is productive, rest is important. And so if you are feeling overwhelmed and you might be trying to do a million things at once, it's totally okay to say, I need to rest and I'm going to take the next hour, 2 hours. I mean, I sat here one night for 5 hours on my butt on the couch and it was hard, but it ended up being really what I needed. So just be okay with that. It's a different time right now. We have all of these expectations of ourselves and how we're supposed to be performing like we used to perform. As it's been mentioned, the stress levels and the constant go, 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 go is a different thing right now. Our Maslow's hierarchy of needs, we're not at the top of like self-actualization. We are literally at the base again because of what's going on. And so don't feel like you have to have the life that you led before up here. It's okay to be down here and don't feel guilty about it. Don't feel like a failure. You're doing great. That's what I want to tell people. Like, you're doing everything you need to be doing, and the best you can be doing. And, we didn't think we were going to live through a pandemic. So this is new for us, and be kind, be compassionate for yourself. You would never say to a friend, you're being lazy for taking an hour break, so internalize that yourself.
I think we should end right there, and I can go take a nap because Romanda said I could. Right?
And actually,
maybe not.
Probably should, Abner. You're doing a fabulous job.
So I think I told you guys as we were preparing for this that time will fly by once we get on here if you're not used to doing it. We're already 3/4 of the way through our allotted time. We planned this for an hour. I think I forgot to mention that at the beginning. But I want to spend a little bit of time focusing some more on some of the tools that are available and resources in the community. And so, Derek, I have a question for you, though. And I don't know if this relates to tools or not. And I can't find my note right now, but I have a note, something about emotional intelligence and what that is and how it can be used as a coping skill. Can you educate me on that a little more?
I will do my best, Abner. But learning is partly your responsibility. So if this doesn't work, just don't blame me entirely.
Okay, deal.
Okay, so yeah, I mean, I've been kind of chewing on this thought a little bit, listening to everyone. We're talking about stress and we're talking about emotions, and emotional intelligence is kind of building your skill set as a human being, kind of like Carolyn said, the thinking and the feeling and the doing. That's the feeling part. And I think there's sort of a weird popular conception that has been around for a long time, but we've moved really far past it. But I think it still endures, where we have a way of like sort of dismissing feelings as less important than thought, right? Because they're irrational by nature, but they're also inextricably connected to everything we do. Like nobody, unless you have like a severe neurological difference, there isn't anyone who doesn't experience emotion in just about anything that they're doing. It might be subtle, it might be background, it might not even occur to us until later. But emotional intelligence partly is getting to be able to recognize that in everything we're doing, we're having an emotional experience. Like for me, starting this, knowing that we're in like a Facebook Live situation, I'm feeling anxiety. I can feel my heart rate, in my, is that the jugular vein right there? And I think, again, to go back to something Carolyn said, there is such great power in being able to accurately identify what it is we're feeling. That's another aspect of emotional intelligence, right? So you've got this awareness. We have to be able to say, I'm feeling an emotion. And I think for guys, this is a little bit harder, and this is a much more complex topic. But I think a lot of men feel like their emotional speeds are either I can be happy or I can be angry, and there's not a lot in between. But the reality is we're so complex, and we can have multiple emotions at one time. But what can be so powerful is naming it. And there's kind of a little saying that, if you remember, could be really helpful, is if you can name it, you can tame it. So there's such great power in being able to say, I am experiencing anxiety. Just doing that, and this has been researched and proven with great evidence, that helps us to be able to make better, more sound decisions, just having an awareness and naming what the emotion is. So it's an incredibly powerful thing. And just to touch on some of the impacts of emotionality, I mean, it affects everything from our attention and our memory and our learning. So there's applications in our personal lives and our professional lives, and of course in education as well. And it's a huge part of our relationships. How do we emotionally connect, and how do we be emotionally honest with our partners, and how do we deal with other people's emotions? So emotional intelligence is also about being skillful with navigating our emotional states and knowing that sometimes we don't always have control over most often we don't have control over the emotions that come up, but we can manage those things. We can emotionally regulate. We can learn how to do those things. And so many of the self-care and coping strategies, particularly like the meditation piece, like mindful breathing, these are things that will immediately start to calm you down physiologically, which is an important first step when you're stressed out to kind of feeling better, is you have to kind of get yourself under control. And that's a great place to start. So in a nutshell, it's just, to me, one of the most valuable things we can invest in, because I think one thing we discovered in the earlier stages of when the pandemic happened back in March and April and May and June, was that a lot of us were experiencing a really common emotion, which was grief. and loss. And not recognizing that was damaging to me. Before I realized, I was in a grieving process because I had lost my sense of normalcy. I had lost the way that I was used to doing my job. I'd lost the way that I was used to connecting with people. So a lot of that is my identity. So I'm grieving almost like a psychological death of who I was, and going through those stages to get to who I'm going to be now is a step that if we miss and we didn't recognize that maybe that was happening to us, can really do us a lot of damage. Like, why do I feel so stressed out? Why am I so upset? Why am I so sad? Why am I so overwhelmed? Like all these things. I think for me, because we can all have different experiences, but for me, I was grieving. I was experiencing the emotion of grief. And sometimes, going through that, like I said, is a roller coaster. And I knew that if I hadn't cried, at some point midweek, I wasn't doing that great, because that's when I was doing my best, is when, working, feeling good, things start to build up. You have to process these things. And I think being emotionally intelligent is also about giving yourself permission to feel those things. To steal the title of this book that talks a lot about this, it's called Permission to Feel, but giving yourself the permission to really feel your emotions, that's not a weakness, and that utilizing it as a strength and building your skill set will literally improve every other aspect of your life.
Yeah. So, Carolyn, I know that was this topic, the grief and sense of loss during COVID. That's something that you had sent a note about or included in your notes for talking points. Is there anything you'd like to add about sense of loss and grief and some of the things that we can do to address those feelings?
Well, I was thinking as Derek was talking, as far as stress, and I was thinking you were going to ask about, parents dealing with their own stressors and how do they manage their kids' experiences. And I think a lot of what Derek was talking about, and a lot is my role as a therapist, is supporting families and giving permission for parents to ask those questions of their kids. Just be open. I think there's this misperception that kids' stress is less important than parental stress, and it's certainly different, but our kids are feeling a lot of stress. So having those discussions, a parent being able to say, I myself included, I'm really frustrated with you guys. I got to go and take a break right now. Because right there in that moment, I'm teaching them, I'm labeling a feeling, I'm frustrated, and I'm saying, it's okay, I'm going to go take a break and I'm going to come back and then we'll talk about it. So that's part of like the labeling of feelings and having it be okay. And I think sometimes parents are scared to share with their kids, like, hey, mom's feeling really stressed out too, or I'm feeling really sad today. I've done a lot of crying, Derek, weekly, once a week or so. And my daughter and my kids are like, Mommy, are you crying? It's like, it's okay to cry. I'm just feeling a little sad, I'm a little down, it's keeps raining. I want some sunshine. And to normalize those feelings. I think parents often forget that kids are always watching us. They're always seeing us. So if we don't tell them, if we don't engage them in childlike talk, they're going to form their own kind of what's going on, because they know that we're stressed before maybe we even do. They know those subtle little cues. And so to be able to have an open dialogue with this, especially with COVID, how was your day? What's it like at school? Like, how's it wearing a mask every day? Like, just opening that dialogue, and to be honest, like, gosh, like, it gets me really angry sometimes that I can't just, like, I really want to learn how to square dance and I can't wait. That's my first thing I'm going to do when things open up, so just being honest and having those conversations that might be difficult, I think, for some parents and parents particularly that I work with, or that we all kind of work with, that maybe are scared themselves, are disconnected or aren't comfortable with their feeling state.
Well, you could probably go take some YouTube lessons on square dancing and just do it right there and, record it for us.
Oh, thank you. And I have. Yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah.
Derek, you had something?
I just wanted to quickly tack onto that is so important what Carolyn's talking about. And I just wanted to give it a different name too, is role modeling. It's the most powerful form of learning, right? I mean, we can tell our students, we can tell our own kids, we can tell our friends one thing, but if we're doing something different, that never ends well. That never works, right? Like, so if we expect to instill the values and the skills of being emotionally intelligent into anyone else, we have to live that, and we have to be all right with expression ourselves, and build up our own emotional vocabulary to be able to name things and to have vulnerable moments that don't indicate weakness but indicate our courage to be vulnerable.
Yeah. Abby, I know you talked a little bit about meditation, and I think you had a little bit more you wanted to add as a tool. Maybe you can tell people a little bit more about the meditation, maybe a breathing exercise, just a simple one. And then where would you go to find more information on this if someone wanted to?
I am here to help you with that. Yeah, so we're talking so much about stress tonight, right? And, one of the tools that I have introduced and shared with others is with meditation, and also just through breathing. There is a direct connection between the breath and reducing stress. And you can reduce the production of those stress hormones that I was talking about, and like counteract all these stress related changes in your body simply by taking a moment and breathing. Personally, I have alerts set on my Apple Watch to remind me to stop and breathe for a minute. And I do it 3, 4 times a day. I get a little buzz on my wrist, and it's like whatever I'm doing, I stop, I close my eyes, and I just breathe for a minute. And I can automatically feel just the tension being released. Some of the benefits to meditation is that anybody can do it. Literally, I think there is this perception, or I've heard that there is this perception that you have to be like a spiritual guru or something to be able to meditate, or it's a religious practice, and it's not. It's simply just breathing. It's more internal based, and so anyone can do it. If you're alive and you have a pulse, you can do it. Children as well. It's great for children and managing that stress at home as well. It's also free, and you're never gonna, it's always with you, right? It's not like you can just forget your keys at home. You can always meditate anytime you want. And I think a few minutes a day can change how your whole day unfolds. Personally, I meditate in the morning when I first wake up. I have like my little Abby bubble where I just like have my routines that everyone was talking about, and I have my tea and I sit and meditate. And I hear a lot of people also saying, well, I don't have the time for that. And, it's like, if you don't have the time, you're probably the one who needs to do it the most. But I mean, nobody needs to do it. But, I would say start with just a minute. Like I said, take that minute and just start breathing. And you will see that it actually changes the way you're perceiving things and the way that you react. So a few breathing exercises that we can talk about, because really breathing has everything to do with stress. Um, so the first one is called the falling out breath. So what you can do is you just take a deep inhale, fill your lungs with as much air as possible, and exhale. And when you exhale, I want you to make a nice big sigh out loud so people can right? And you can immediately, this one's good for releasing physical tension in your body. You can immediately feel that sigh. It really just relieves something. The next one is called the box breath. And this one's more for your mind. So you inhale and you count to 4. You hold your breath at the top and count to 4. And then you exhale and count to 4. And then you hold your breath at that bottom. And this is a good way to increase mindfulness. By meaning mindfulness, I mean just I'm talking about what's going on right now. A lot of times when I feel really overwhelmed, I stop and I remind myself what's really going on. I get overwhelmed by thoughts of the future and thoughts of the past. What do I have to do? Where do I have to be? What's the next thing I have to do? And it's like, stop and just get present. I'm okay. I'm here in this room. I have a roof over my head. I have a pantry full of food. I'm happy. Everything is okay. Those things are not happening right now. They are in the future. And so by bringing in the box breath, it reminds you to just be present. And then the last one I want to talk about is the emptying breath, where you inhale to the count of 3 and then exhale slowly to the count of 6. And you focus on releasing as much air as possible. And this will work to calm your insides down. It's a strategy to activate the parasympathetic nervous system and calm the sympathetic nervous system, which just means calm you down. As far as meditation goes, what I recommend is people can start with just sitting in a quiet room, close your eyes, and just breathe. You don't have to make it a half-hour event. You can make it 1 minute to 3 minutes and just listen to your breath going in and out and focus on that. And if your brain wanders to something else, that's okay. Don't chastise yourself. Just calmly redirect yourself back to listening to your breath and start with that.
That's great.
Yeah.
Those are great. Thank you, Abby. As I was listening to you, I'm like, well, I do those exercises all the time. I sigh all the time. I usually try to not let people hear me sigh when they're talking, but but those are good ideas. I was doing them as you were saying them. So thanks for sharing those. I feel great.
Awesome. Good. I recommend if somebody wants to do a guided meditation, you're not comfortable doing it yourself, you can download the Headspace app. I also have the Chopra app. There's a free meditation going on right now about cultivating peace. And there's a bunch of other apps like the Calm app or Inscape, or just having a oh, there you go. He's got the Calm app. There you go.
Yeah.
And Headspace. Mind, body.
All right. He's on it. Very good. Well, maybe we can add that information to the resource page as well. So, so Romanda, I know we're getting close to the end of time here, but I know that Ketchikan Wellness Coalition has some different programs and resources available. And I know that in the notes talk about food security and financial security and that sort of thing. And those all play in, right, to our emotions and our stress levels. So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, there's a couple things I'll mention tonight. On Ketchikan Wellness Coalition's website, we did initially have pages, all COVID resources. My favorite one, though, is the fun one. So, because it's all like funny things and stuff. But there's ones with financial resources and food security resources. We haven't been updating it since kind of the first, I think it was like the first 4 months. We updated it like every day. And then we realized that things weren't changing as fast as they were previously. So people could go to that site and still see them. And it's organized in a way you can click on like financial, food security, housing. And so you can actually see things change. Please know that we haven't updated it now for a few months. So there might be some new things that we have not added to it that's more new. But at least, so for example, food security, Love in Action, they provide a monthly food box. And so even if you went to our website to see what their information is, you'd still see that they had a food box, and you would know you could reach out to them and find out when their next food box was going to be. One thing that a lot of people don't know about is that some of our schools actually have a food pantry available for students and families, so that students could go and get some food. I'm sorry, I don't actually have the list in front of me because not every single school has them. We are trying to get them up to date just to make sure who's still able to do that right now, because things have changed with COVID. The other thing I'm going to mention is the Ketchikan, and so I wonder if you can see it here, the Ketchikan 123 Community Resource Guide. And so this is something that we produce. We update the physical copy once a year. So it's about 6 months old, and I think only one thing has changed so far, thankfully. We did put the PDF version on our website, so it is there under the resources as well. And we did have an online version of it available. We're just having some technical difficulties we're working through. Those should be fixed up here and within, I think, about a week. And then this is on there. What's great about this resource is that it is divided up, like, I don't know if you can see it. It's hard. It's divided by kind of what you're looking for. So like mental health and recovery. So for those that are really like, I want to make that effort into treatment, where are those treatment options? Social services and food pantries. So financial support programs, as well as food pantries. Children and youth services support groups. So we actually have some amazing support groups in our community. Some are specifically around grief for those that might have experienced loss. We have a traumatic brain injury support group, women's group. There's a behavioral health support group. So lots of support groups. And then of course our faith organizations. And for a lot of people that either are new to town and don't know whether a faith organization, there's a lot. And so finding that connection there as well. So this version is online on our website, Ketchikan Wellness Coalition's website. It's ktnkwc.org, but it's easy just to Google us. And then the other thing I really wanted to mention tonight quickly before we kind of take off is we got some CARES Act funding to support our youth space. And so we've got a youth alliance, which is a group of youth that meet on Wednesdays, and they're actually taking on community projects that they're passionate about to improve the lives of teens in our community. But beyond that, we're actually open Monday to Friday after school up until 6. So as long as the kids are in the Plaza Mall before 5, they can access the space. We've had really fun shopping. There's like bean bags and there's TVs and games and there's video games. So it's an open space. We actually have Chromebooks. So if kids want to come and just like hang out and do some schoolwork, they can do that. We always have snacks. It is a teen space, so the ideal kind of age group is typically in high school. But specifically, we're actually offering a couple workshops coming up that I think would be amazing. There's one called Conquer Negative Thinking, and it's a 6-session series, and it's being led by Sam Funk, who joined you last time actually, and she's a mental health counselor now through Wish, but at the school, and she's offering that. So if parents are listening tonight and you feel like your young person might benefit from this workshop, please do go to our website. Underneath the Youth Alliance, you can find out how to register for that. We also have teen mental health first aid training. And this is a phenomenal evidence-based curriculum. Every single grade 10 student is going to have it in school, but our grade 11s and 12s have also asked for it. So we're hosting one session at the end of this month. It's 3 sessions long, and it's facilitated actually by our, we have 3 trained instructors that are teachers at K-High, and they're going to be at the youth space doing that. So for youth, we've got an opportunity to connect. We have COVID protocols that we've worked with the EOC on, like making sure everyone's safe. If the school is closed, our space is closed as well. But other than that, we are open Monday to Friday. So it's just a nice space for young people to be able to go if they're tired of always being home. Or I know a lot of them were saying like, we can't hang out at school anymore. And so space to come. The full calendar from January to March, I mean, I want to go to some of these workshops, and it's up on our website as well, the Wellness Coalition's website. So
I was just going to ask you if that was all available on your website, so that if people didn't catch it there was a lot of material there. So if you didn't catch it as Romanda went through it and write it all down, you could go to the Ketchikan Wellness Coalition site and get that. So
underneath the Youth Alliance Task Force. So
perfect. So we are, we're 8 minutes long already because somebody likes to talk, probably me, but, maybe all of us. I did want to, normally the past couple times we've offered closing comments. I just want to make sure that if any of the panel has closing comments, then I have one final question for Abby before we close out. Anybody have any last closing thoughts that you want to make?
I would just in regard to emotional intelligence, if it helps people to approach this concept who maybe are leery of it or aren't really sure where to start, just think of emotions as information. They're telling us something about what's going on that we may need to approach or respond to, or maybe something we need to back up from. But be a kind of like a scientist about your emotional experience. Try to notice it, take note of it, be mindful of it, and use that as information to take some kind of action. And also set healthy boundaries with social media, because it's real easy to go down rabbit holes and to work yourself into a state before you realize, the stress that you're in because of something that's happening online. And there's plenty of it, and none of it is designed to keep you emotionally calm.
No, that's for sure.
Yeah.
So we are kind of running out of time, and I know some of us can never get enough of the discussion. I think we'll probably do another one of these coming up. We've been talking about doing potentially some more sessions, but KPU TV has actually put together a series, Let's Talk About. And so, Abby, maybe you can talk a little bit about that real quick just to close us out, because I think you have a premiere tonight, right?
We do. We have a premiere. So if you're watching this on Facebook, on the City of Ketchikan Facebook page, just stay tuned, because the video will premiere automatically at 7 p.m. So now I'm putting my KPU TV hat on right now. And so, yeah, we have a new show that's coming out in partnership with the Show and Bar Middle School, and Janelle Wallace there was a wonderful person to work with. And our very own Romanda and Derek are featured on this show. And it is a show to talk about the important topics that are happening in our community. So this one was specifically about grief during the holidays, because with the pandemic and everything that's going on, a lot of people have had to part ways with traditions that are familiar to them during the end of the year, and we're starting the beginning of the year. And so it's a lot about recognizing what grief looks like and resources in our community where people can reach out to. And so I encourage everyone to watch it. It's 27 minutes and it's fascinating, and they did a great job.
That's awesome. Thank you, Abby. And if anybody watching wants to share the content of this video, it'll continue to be available on the City of Ketchikan Facebook page. I believe it'll also be on the KPU Live YouTube channel, right? And we did stream it over KPU TV tonight. So anyhow, I think that's all that we have for this evening, folks. If you've been watching the whole time, thank you for staying around. To the panelists, thank you for taking the time out of your evening to come do this with me. I really appreciate it. And stay safe, Ketchikan.
Thanks.